And just a sound check for the people in the room, assuming you can hear me okay. And we'll do a chant that's on page 26 in just a moment. Those of you online, it's there in the document that I've been putting in the chat that you can open up if you'd like. And we'll get started in another minute or two. Remember, there are extra supplies in the closet rather, if you need something you don't have, so you can sit comfortably. Yeah, and one thing is don't sit under a vent or over a vent, because now that vent is blowing, but it sucks a lot of air in. But because we have a kind of a high-end recycling outside air coming in. I mean, it heats it as it comes in and out, but there is a lot of air moving, which is good during COVID times. But yeah, if you avoid where the vents are, that helps a little. Yeah. And somebody could check the thermostat. It should be at 68, but yeah, would you just go look? Okay, good. So as a lot of you know, we've been doing this particular chant that's on page 26 in our chant book here in the room, and is printed on the document that's in the chat. The Buddha's 5 remembrances, or the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. So let's go ahead and do that now. And as we're doing it, and if you don't want to chant along, just listen. And just let the words and the meaning of the words have their effect. We don't have to force anything. We're just letting this contemplation have its effect. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Thus we should frequently recollect. And settle in. Adjust the body as you need to, so you'll be comfortable during the sitting time. can be happy that we have this time to be here together on Zoom, in person here at the City Center. In that wider sense of people who have found real value in putting some time aside to practice being right in the middle. So it's important that we don't rush into some meditation practice. And it's more useful to contemplate with a lot of integrity now, just entering, opening to the stream, the activity of our lives, the activity of the mind and body here. I know it can sound a little strange to say it this way, but we're meeting our life, we're connecting or opening to the reality of this body and mind, this life here. And we're learning that perhaps it's safe to relax and safe to feel what's here to feel, to be sensitive. Perhaps it's safe to drop some of the armor and distractedness and to quite literally be exposed to what's moving. And what's moving is our life, right here and now. The activity of the body and the mind. That's what's moving. In all the ways the body and the mind is sensitive. And there's no end to this flow of sensitivity, sense contact. And so in particular, because we've been studying anicca, which is the Pali word for impermanence, the insubstantial, unreliable, changing nature of our thoughts, of our bodies, of the world we live in. And we want to especially highlight that simple, obvious truth right now, right here and now. Absolutely everything that we're sensitive to now has this nature to change, is changing, unfolding, arising, passing. As much as we might imagine that this moment has some kind of solid ground for us, when we actually open in a more direct, mindful way, we just find movement, the flow or the natural unfolding of experiences coming and going. And every time the mind conceives that right now it's like this, basically telling ourselves the story of our life, but even that sense of solidity that those stories, that narration provides, we can notice how that story is always changing and unfolding. Even if at times it seems the same, it's a different expression, different version. The future, of course, isn't here, doesn't exist. The past is already gone, doesn't exist. But we can open to the very dynamic nature of the present, and we can learn how to keep in mind, be sensitive to the simple truth of change here and now in the present. So we could begin by just being aware of hearing and all the sounds together, just that open awareness of the experience of hearing. But sense it as a movement, an ongoing flow, unfolding of sound, never ceasing. Like a river of sound. And the same is true with visual images, presuming your eyes are closed, but even if your eyes are open, just notice the visual field is also in flux. There's nothing constant about this flow or movement of visual images coming, going, morphing, changing. Whether we're seeing distinct images like watching a video or just the play of colors, shapes, textures. There's nothing fixed about the visual field. And it can appear that bodily sensations have a certain constancy to them, especially when we're resisting pain in the body, for example. It can feel at times quite solid, fixed, never changing, but I want to bring curiosity and a deeper sensitivity, and to begin to feel the body as this very alive, swirling, moving ocean of sensation. Where even the places in the body that initially have the appearance of being solid or fixed really can be experienced as a dance, a movement of sensation, even if it's quite subtle. But remember, we're not trying to see impermanence, we're aspiring to connect with things just as they are. And the interest in the impermanent nature is simply a clue that we got from the Buddha. that everything is changing and unfixed, and ultimately not a thing, not a substantial thing, but more of a changing process. And this is especially true in terms of mental activity. The thoughts, the perceptions, the feeling tones that come and go are so ephemeral. Even the mood isn't a fixed thing. So as we continue to sit in silence now, instead of being, because of habit, in allegiance with what has the appearance of being fixed, we're going to practice trusting, being in the allegiance of this great movement of bodily and mental activities, inner and outer change, flux. And in a sense, we're learning to align or harmonize with the truth of change, the way it is, the way it always has been. But instead of being in denial or distracted or resistant to change, just aligning and harmonizing and allowing things to be the way they are. So we'll continue now in silence. And remember, if you like to use the breath as a meditation anchor, it's totally fine with this contemplation of impermanence. Just let that particular lens, Dharma lens of impermanence, inform the awareness of the breathing process, or with whatever anchor you're working with. And even if you're experiencing a lot of drama in the thinking mind, instead of trying to stop it, notice its changing nature. So we're not paying attention to the content of the thoughts or emotions, but rather that they're moving, coming and going, unfolding. And for the last couple minutes, sensing the open or groundless quality of the body and the mind of this moment. So there's a habit of presuming things are fixed or solid. But let's consider this moment, the conditions coming and going now in this moment, as being unfixed and without ground, without solidity. But this is just an invitation to be real with the way it is, not to concoct something. So in what ways is this moment groundless, unfixed? And can I keep this in mind and learn to trust that these qualities of anicca, change, and take a moment, stretch your body as you need to. And again, a big welcome to everyone, especially those of you who might be here for the first time. I know it's not always easy to step into a new place, so great courage. And feel free to check in with me or Lisa, who's here, our program host, if you have any questions about the center. Lisa and I will be around afterward. And we've been talking about the three characteristics, one of the central teachings in the Buddhist teachings. And it's really addressing the question for us, it's a practical, functional question. What, when I pay attention to it, what, in terms of what's here, what way of connecting or understanding what's here for us in any moment, what, when I pay attention to it, naturally leads the heart to let go of what is good to let go of, like being attached, being in opposition, being in conflict, being tight with hate. Some of you know one of the famous lines from the Buddhist teachings in the Dhammapada is there's no grip, there's no fire like greed, there's no grip like hate, there's no net like delusion. And so what, when I keep it in mind, when I pay attention to it, causes the heart to let go of that burning, that grip, that confusing, entangling net of delusion. Just like we could ask a related question, like what, when I pay attention to it, fuels the burning of greed and lust, and fuels the grip of hate and aversion, and fuels the confusing net of delusion. I mean, so those are the ideas, those are relevant questions. Because a lot of times we feel helpless in our lives, like stuff happens. That's like bumper sticker. Happens. The word that comes before, the SH word, right? Stuff happens, but not stuff. And it's a way of externalizing the problem. And in a way, it frees us up of the responsibility of having to do something with my life, because I'm just a victim to blank happening. So I don't have to, it's not my blank. It's everybody else's blank happening to me. And I'm just the victim. And so we do get a little release there, because at least I don't have to do anything different. I don't have to make any change, because it's not my fault. It's stuff happening to me. And what we're doing with the three characteristics, this teaching, is we're wondering, which is a very, such a natural, appropriate wondering, like, what can I do? I mean, it really arises out of that self-compassion, given that the world is the way it is. We say that with humility. I don't pretend to know in the depth the way it is, but the world, whatever the way it is the way that it is. So given that it's this way, what's a skillful way for me to be relating, to be showing up? And instead of just randomly trying different ways, we have some pointing out instructions from our wise elders, like the Buddha. He says, well, it's not the habitual way, it's not the way we've been conditioned to experience our lives, but you might just practice perceiving the truth of change, that things are in motion. I mean, we all kind of know that things are changing, and we all have a lot of experience that things are unsatisfactory. We've had so many different experiences in our lives. Some of them are what we would call nice experiences, but yet we're not completely satisfied. I think I can speak for us all, right? And that it's impersonal. So the Buddha's saying, try arranging your life, and in particular the way you perceive and the way you relate and the way we understand, and keep those related three perceptions in mind, that things are changing and that things aren't, as I don't know if people know Ruth King, she's come here to teach a couple times, a wonderful teacher. I put a link to one of her articles, and she says, things change, things are not personal, and they're not perfect, right? And that's sort of code. Not perfect is code for they're unsatisfactory. They don't, experiences, even the nice experiences we've had, they don't provide perfect satisfaction. So perfect that the contentment never wavers. We're always burning with desires, even if sometimes the desire is not wanting things to change, but that's still suffering. Not wanting things to change is its own kind of suffering. Okay, I'm pretty healthy now. I don't want that to change, or I've got a good situation in this part of my life or that part of my life. But absolutely everything is subject to change, like that line that we chanted at the beginning. All that is mine, beloved, pleasing to me, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. And to really it should make everything that is currently pleasant more poignant, because we don't know when and we don't know how, but we do know it's going to change. And that, that's poignant. Like the health that we have, it's as nice as it is to be healthy, it won't always be this way. And some of you are not healthy, and you know that indirectly in your experience, or whatever part of our life we might point to. And then the Buddha gives us very provocative teachings. Well, what happens to my heart and the experience of stress and suffering when I keep these three perceptions in mind, that things are changing and unfixed, and therefore not dependable, therefore not capable of providing perfect satisfaction, and that things are impersonal, that they come and go because of causes and conditions. Even strangely, it's strange at least to say it, even our thoughts, which on the surface have the appearance of being as personal as anything is, because they're my secret thoughts, They're happening here, we even point like as if there's some place back there where they happen. No, they're happening here, not there, here, in the present moment, in what we call the mind or the heart, or you could say the center, right here. That's where thoughts, emotions, that's where everything is being known, right here. Even what I see out there or here over there, all of that seeing and hearing is happening here in the mind, in the heart, in the moment, right in the middle. So we're having this experience of mind, we say in Buddhism. It's strange to say it that way. And the experience of mind is fundamentally ephemeral, unsatisfactory, and impersonal. Right? And it's like we have a moment of mind, whatever it's like for each of us, and then we have another moment of mind, and then another moment of mind, and there's an endless succession of these moments of mind. And this isn't, I mean, it sounds philosophical, metaphysical, but it's meant to be experienceable, right? But we have to cultivate enough interest and stability of present moment awareness. We actually have to be interested not in the content of thought or our interpretation of what we're seeing or hearing or touching, but we have to get interested in the sort of experience, the movement, the activity of the mind and body as a movement, as a flow, a river of our lives. And we don't need a different moment to do this. We can do it right now, hearing a Dharma talk, feeling our body, hearing sounds, seeing sights, thinking about what's being said. All of that is this swirling, changing, moving, unfixed, happening so quickly it's very hard to catch a moment of mind. What we catch is that we can't catch it. That's really what we catch. That's the sort of more obvious evidence that we have that the pointing out instructions we got from the Buddha align with reality, with the way it is that and it doesn't matter, like I said earlier, what we're paying attention to. So we might be sitting, and maybe part of our meditative training is we go to the breath, and we feel the breath coming in, and we feel the breath going out. That's a very common technique taught in an early Buddhist or an insight meditation, Vipassana meditation center like Common Ground, because the Buddha practiced that himself way back 2,500 years ago. But the idea isn't to cling to the breath coming in and the breath going out. The idea is to observe that simple subset of reality, right? Because that's what the breath is. It's just one aspect of the big dance we call the present moment. And because it doesn't matter whether we take the big picture or we tune into a particular part, we're going to see the same thing. We're going to see the ephemeral nature of the breath, that the more stable the present moment awareness is, the more refined the interest or curiosity is, the less invasive the awareness is. Like we don't have an agenda with the breath. We're just receptive, just receiving that ordinary process of breathing in, that physical process of breathing in and breathing out. But what we actually find subjectively in our experience, every one of us will find the same thing, which is there's no there. The more we look for the breath, the more ephemeral and insubstantial it begins to seem. Same thing with the body generally. Like if you just, instead of the breath as your meditation anchor, you use whole body awareness. You feel the body sitting. Initially, when we sit, it's like twisted steel, and we feel all the aches and pains and old injuries and restlessness and, all that, what we normally feel when we sit and bring the awareness to the experience of the body. And then as we study that interest and that attention to the physicality of the sitting body, or it could be a walking body or standing body or lying down body. The posture doesn't matter, right? It's just the experience of bodily sensation. It's almost like what the physicists discover when they look at objects. First we see the wooden lectern, and then eventually you see the cells of the wood, and then below that, you start to see the molecules that make up the cells, and then you see the atoms that make up the molecules, And then but basically what do physicists say they find the more they look? Space, empty space, right? And, that's not our subjective experience, but it's because we haven't chosen to get interested in experience, our direct subjective experience, whether it's of the body or the mind. The Buddha says that as much as we should develop this perception with the body, so much more so we should develop it with the mind. I guess I didn't bring it with me. There's a sutta where the Buddha says, at least the body has the semblance of stability, but thoughts, the mental conceptions, all the concocting and imagining and storytelling and incessant internal dialogue, how substantial is any of that? It is just so insubstantial. But we have a thought, it's an insubstantial thought, but a persistent insubstantial thought that basically says, this is real. Like whatever we're concocting, it doesn't matter what thought, what story, what imagining, it always has sort of the footnote. And by the way, this is real. Pay no attention to the insubstantial nature of this thought, because it represents reality. It's as if that lie is embedded in every bit of mental activity. Isn't that the case? Whatever we think. We might have sort of a fleeting thought that the person we're sitting next to is like really cool. Or the person we're sitting next to we're not so sure of. But in that moment when that thought is there, it has a solidity, like it represents reality, some unchanging reality that this is actually true. Even though we might have an interaction with that person later in the lobby on the way out, and the view could be radically different. Or I have had this happen. I mean, it's a real sign of delusion, but you're sitting and then you got there early and then the room fills up more as time goes on, but you're not looking around because that's not a cool thing for Buddhists to do when you're at a meditation center, because you're not attached. But you have internally, of course, you're very attached. Like, who's that sitting next to me? And so you might just do the soft gaze, and you're just sort of getting some identifiable clues, like the color of their clothes or the way they're sitting. And you might have a very strong conviction, I know who that person is. And you might have all kinds of, I'm going to ask them out to lunch. And then, after the program, it's like, it's not that person. And it's like that reality that was so substantial just pops, like a bubble pops. But we miss that moment of something that had solidity losing its solidity. Because that would make us have more integrity, have the kind of cognitive process, have more integrity if we spent the whole day really catching every time there was some concoction, some idea, some fixed view, opinion, some certain perception we're certain about, and then we notice when it pops, like, it ain't that way. But we miss that, because then that would do, if we really chose to pay attention, to keep in mind how inaccurate and insubstantial and ephemeral our mental constructions are, is we'd stop taking them so personally. We'd stop imagining that whatever we're concocting or thinking is more than what it is. Yeah, it's my opinion now, but who knows? After this, I'm going to do X, but who knows? In fact, one of my teachers even said, you should just train your mind to tag on that line after every single thought. Who knows? Who knows? Or maybe not so. Who knows? Because it brings a kind of integrity, because we don't know. Every once in a while, one of the cars at the center in the parking lot get broken into. Almost always, there's a bag sitting in the car. It's just something we remind in-person people about. But it's like, you have this idea that and then you've got to deal with the broken glass and the insurance. And it's like the day and maybe even the week and maybe longer changes on a dime, just like that. And that's just a small thing. So for those who might want to stay for the small groups, both here in person and online, we always have the opportunity, it's just optional of course, to stay for 15 minutes at the end of the Sunday morning program from 11:45 to 12 noon Minnesota time here. And we'll organize small groups whether you're online or in person. And it just gives you a chance to meet people in the community, but also, and maybe even more importantly, to have a conversation. And there's a cumulative effect when you hear from other people about, it's like explorers, except instead of going out to see new lands, we're looking inward in ways that we haven't looked inward before. And then we report back, and then collectively we learn a lot because it's like triangulation. Shannon says this about their experience, and Jenny says this about their experience, and Harry says that about their experience, and this was my experience, and we start to get the shape of the land. Oh, right? Because we all have our own biases. So what we do in these small groups, just as an encouragement, is just initially there's just an introduction. You share your name, maybe your pronouns, maybe where you're from. Settle in. Create a little sacred space, like we're really here to listen to each other, not to judge, not to even interrupt each other, but everyone gets 2 or 3 minutes just to share some reflections about what I've said or that comes out of their practice. And the other people are just practicing being receptive, just receiving that person. And then there's usually 5 or so minutes at the end, depending, for people just to talk openly. And that's the time you can ask clarifying questions if you didn't really understand what someone said, or you had a similar experience and you want to make that connection, or whatever. So consider joining that, because this is what we want to do. We want to get a sense of the universality. Sometimes these 3 characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta, the truth of change, the unsatisfactory, or as Ruth King says, the imperfect, things are not perfect, and the impersonal nature, they're called the universal characteristics. In this moment, we're all experiencing the specific characteristics of this moment. Like, I feel the coolness of the air, maybe some of you do too. But some of you might be feeling warmth, having a different experience, depending. Or I have a little pain in my knee, but others don't. So we have, or I might be a little sad or a little bit elevated, my mood, but it will be different than. Those are what we call specific characteristics of our experience. What I see, what I hear, what I feel emotionally, what I feel as sensations, the content of my thoughts, the kind of energetic system, sleepy or not sleepy. It's all very specific. But behind those specific characteristics are some universal truths. Whatever we're noticing has the nature to change, is in the process of change, is by its very nature unfixed, not solid ground, impermanent, and can't unable to satisfy the heart. Because the heart, on this kind of surface egoic level, it wants happiness that doesn't go away, and it wants to get rid of unpleasant experience so it doesn't come back. But that never happens. But that's what it wants. And that's the problem. The problem with impermanence isn't that things are impermanent. The problem is there's this sense, this diluted or egoic sense of wanting permanence in a world that doesn't provide permanence. It's the mismatch or the misperception, right? We perceive as if I can really get rid of the painful and get the pleasant in a way that's lasting, despite all the evidence. I mean, we've had so much evidence. But we don't know what to do to give up that sort of fundamentalist belief that we'll be the one. I mean, it's like one of my teachers, early teachers, Michelle McDonald, during one of the 3-month retreats I was doing, this is in the 90s, and she took a day off to go see her older aunt. I think she was like 94, 95, in Massachusetts. And when she walked in, and I think the aunt was like in the hospital. It was back in the day where you could actually spend a few days in the hospital. And visited her aunt, and the first words out of her aunt's mouth was, "Why me?" Which, in a way, you could imagine someone saying that. But when you think about it, a 94, 95-year-old person wondering why they're experiencing ill health, but it is surprising when stuff happens to us, because we always thought stuff happened to other people until it happens to us. I mean, I know that isn't exactly right, but generally, we're surprised when bad stuff happens. Imagine if instead, whenever there was a car accident or some other sort of dramatic, including positive dramatic things in our lives, imagine if wisdom and the mind and the heart said, oh yeah, sometimes it's like this, good stuff happens. Or sometimes it's like this, bad stuff happens. Oh yeah, that's how it is. Sometimes, because we think, what only happens 1 out of 100 times. But we forget, but in the course of my life, I'll have 10,000 opportunities. So if it happens 1 out of 100, do the math. It's going to happen to me, I'm guessing now, is that 100 times? Something like that, right? So, and that's the thing with illness, sickness, death, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame, disrepute, praise and blame. We're going to experience some share of that, because there are so many opportunities for people to blame us or for people to praise us. So sometimes, oh yeah, I'm getting a lot of praise. Yeah, sometimes that's how it plays out. Oh, I'm getting a lot of blame right now. Okay, that's how it is right now. Sometimes it's my turn to get blamed. Or I'll have some success, or I'll have some failure. I'll do something that's really cool, I'll do something that's really humiliating. I'll look good, I won't look good. It's like, and I'm not saying it's the same for each of us, but there's always that uncertain play. So what I thought in the small groups, and just generally for us to contemplate this week as we continue to dig in, and basically we're training our habits of perception. Instead of seeing in a distorted way where we imagine things are permanent, imagine things could be satisfying, imagine things are personal, we're trying to perceive in these other ways. And the question to reflect on together with your friends who practice, otherwise friends in the small groups, if you're going to stay, is like, have you ever sensed the liberating quality of that? Because the Buddha says, when we cultivate these perceptions, when we train the way we perceive to perceive the truth of change and how things are always imperfect, never perfect, never capable of perfectly satisfying us, and they're not personal. So when we train ourselves to see through those 3 lenses, which is really just a way to become more intimate with the way it is, do we experience healing and relief and release? Is it in the direction that the heart trusts? And you could also reflect the opposite, like in those places where I do perceive solidity, do imagine that I've got solid ground in a way that's satisfying, and that things are personal. What do we get from those perceptions? Do we get something positive from those ways of perceiving or not? And just to be honest, like not to parrot what you think a Buddhist answer will be, but just to unpack your experience together. That's the idea. And of course, we can do this alone. This is our practice, but it is helpful. The nuns and the monks, back in the day, they spent a lot of time practicing, even today, in seclusion, but they had regular times they'd gather. Usually, after their meal, a lot of them just would have one meal a day. They'd clean up, and then they would chat. And this is the thing that they would talk about, the truth of impermanence and the danger of thinking things are permanent, the truth of unsatisfactoriness, and the danger of imagining something is perfectly satisfying. Even a really being able to get a lot of calm and tranquility in your meditation practice, which is really nice and really useful in a lot of different ways. But we can't count on it, can we? Because not every sit's going to lead to tranquility. But if we have a number of sits where there's been some real peacefulness and tranquility, then what arises? Some expectation. It's going to be this way. I finally figured out how to calm my mind, and it's always going to be this way. I've had really good friends, that were on a real roll. They were getting really deep states of meditation, a lot of deep peace and calm, and it just went away. And it wasn't that they made a mistake or took a wrong turn, or it's just things change. And the freedom we're looking for isn't the freedom to escape the messiness of life by having a really peaceful meditation. That can be really nice when we're experiencing a lot of stress, to be able to touch into some real peace. Maybe you can do that in meditation. Maybe you need a spa day or a good massage, or whatever works. But whatever it is that gives us a temporary break from the messiness, we always end up back there. And the interesting thing in Buddhist cosmology, which, who knows about that, about the reality of that, but it's useful to keep an open mind, and it's definitely useful to use it as a teaching. So in the Buddhist cosmology, there are these angelic, beautiful realms. I mean, they're angelic realms where beings have bodies of light, have lovely, beautiful bodies. They're born, and you're immediately like an 18-year-old. And then you stay in that kind of perfect bloom of youth until moments before you die. And then you die, right? And your life is like eons long. Some of those more refined realms are described as being as long as, many of the expansions and contractions of the universe. We have our Big Bang, and then maybe, who knows, some big contraction. But your life is longer than that, so a long time. And it's like glorious until it isn't. And that's the suffering of those celestial realms, is it's very easy to believe this is going to go on forever. It's so nice. It's so refined. It's like the way you make love is just look each other in the eye. You don't have to eat solid food. It's just like you consume bliss. That's your nutriment, right? So they have these really wonderful ways of describing these realms. But the point is they end. They arise and then they end. Same with the hell realms, the hellish realms. And they're basically descriptions for our own life, because maybe some part of your life you lived in a really sweet place where everybody was nice to each other and there was no messiness until there was, till you no longer were in that place, right? Or maybe you were in a hell realm for a while in your life. And then that ceased too, didn't it? And even today will be many versions of heaven and hell. Many of them. And the human realm is sort of considered in the middle. where there's just enough suffering that we won't be deluded if we have a pleasant existence. Now, clearly, some people are in that realm here on this planet where they imagine that whatever good fortune they have is going to really be meaningful all the way forever, which of course it won't. And some people have too much exposure, too much suffering, and they can't even be interested. But if we are fortunate, then we have enough suffering that we don't go to sleep and indulge in the pleasantness, that the good fortune that we have. And we don't have too much suffering so that we're just in that panic animal survival mode, which we're there some of the time. Hopefully you're not there all the time. Some people clearly are, and what they need is not so much the Buddhist teachings. They need food or shelter or safety, or they need to be held, or they need to be treated fairly, right? But when we have enough good fortune and we still can sense the proximity of change and suffering, then we really want to take advantage. What, when I pay attention to it, leads to a release so that my heart is released even in the middle of change and unsatisfactoriness and impersonal nature. Because we're interested in freedom that's here and now. We're not interested, it's totally fine to want to go to heaven, to some heavenly place, whether it's here on this planet where you move. I used to say Edina, and then I got pushback. Huh? Well, there are places, that are, more affluent. Whatever you imagine is a nice place, because we all have our own imaginings of where that nice place is. Edina is not my nice place, just by the way. But it probably is, and I'm sure, I know some people in the community live in Edina. I'm just making it deeper and deeper. When is it going to end? And people who don't live in Minnesota, you don't know what I'm talking about. It's just one of the more affluent suburbs outside of Minneapolis. But the idea is that it's totally okay for us to seek permanent happiness and well-being in things that change, because that's how we learn. Like a lot of us are going to do it at lunch today, right? We're going to get the lunch we want. We have the resources to eat what we want to eat, and we're hoping it's going to make me feel good in a way that's meaningful. And we'll get a little gratification eating the lunch we want. And then if we're careful not to distract ourselves, we can notice that was nice, but I'm still not completely satisfied. Now I'm thinking about an afternoon snack, or an entertaining thing to watch, or some other thing to provide satisfaction, because that didn't do it. And we want to highlight that didn't do it. The changing nature, lunch came, yeah, if we're lucky it had some gratification, but it didn't last, and the gratification wasn't permanently gratifying, which means it's unsatisfactory. It doesn't mean it's bad, it just means it wasn't perfect. And all of that we've done 100 times, or more, and it's not very personal. We keep doing the same thing, looking for a sense experience to be satisfying. It doesn't end up being totally satisfying. Seeking out another sense experience that we're hoping will be satisfying turns out not to be permanently satisfying. It's not very personal. It's just these, tendencies, these habits playing themselves out in our heart and mind, right? In our lives. And we can view our life in this way. Wisdom, in a way, it steps back, not literally, but in a way it steps back and it observes the activity of me, this body and mind, doing all of that I just described, and sees that activity as the play of nature, not self. I mean, in conventional language we say, I'm doing it, but is there really a you back there doing it? Or is it just the play of habit? And like I said at the beginning, and I'll end here, and this, could be part of the small group discussions if you stay for them. What happens when we start to notice and keep in mind that impersonal nature? Oh, been here, done this. Here I go again. Even in the middle of trying to get satisfaction from the corn chips and the spicy salsa, right there in the enjoying, in the crunching and the tasting and the swallowing, and noticing that part of the mind that's hoping that the pleasantness of it, while it's still pleasant before we're too full, is really going to be something substantial. And we start to catch the whiff of, oh, this is the same old thing. Same old thing. I mean, different, slightly different always. Corn chips one day, popcorn another day, or whatever it is. But to start to see the impersonal nature, and then we start to see it in our friends, right? Isn't it true, those of you who are raising children? It's like you see the pattern. And it's just like a different lens you put on, where you're seeing the child as the activity of those causes and conditions, those patterns. Oh yeah, that's just that pattern playing itself out. And see it in ourselves, see it out there, how winter becomes spring, spring becomes summer. One pattern after another, we see remember the changing nature, the unsatisfactory nature, and the impersonal nature. They're just different ways of connecting, being intimate with the way it is. Just different lenses or ways of getting close, getting intimate with the way it is. We're not seeing different things. We're just different ways of seeing the same thing. What in Buddhism we call Dhamma, or Dharma is the Sanskrit version, which it means different, kind of slightly different definitions of Dharma or Dhamma, but it basically means the way it is, the underlying nature, the way it is beyond our cognitive interpretation. So when our connection isn't dominated by our cognitive interpretations, then the way that is. And that's really this practice that we're in the middle of. So I'll leave it here, and I'll just mention a few things coming up, because we have a number of guest teachers. I'll be teaching a retreat next weekend, so I won't be leading. I have a couple invitations out, so I'm not sure who's going to be here, but somebody wonderful will be here teaching next Sunday morning. Shelley Graff will be teaching next Sunday night. Then this coming Thursday, Rebecca Bradshaw will be giving a public talk in person and online. And then on Friday the 24th, Chaz de Capua, another wonderful teacher. Both Rebecca and Chaz are from the East Coast, but they come to lead a retreat in Minnesota every winter. And we're fortunate that they give a talk here at the City Center. Both of those, again, on Zoom and in person. I'll be doing a day-long retreat on the 25th. Stacy McClendon and I are leading a retreat for people new to Buddhist retreat practice, March 9th through 12th. And there's a number of other programs, including 2 retreats in April that I'll be leading, one with Ramesh Sairam and one with Gabe Keller Flores. And those registrations will come out probably this coming week. So you can look for those if you're interested in getting out to the retreat center for some practice. Good, I'll leave it there. So those of you online, you could just stay online, and I'll divide you up into small groups. Those of you in the room, Lisa will divide you into small groups. But if you're going to take off, have a good week. Thanks for coming. Really great to be together. So folks online, I'll just give folks a minute or two to leave before I divide you into small groups of 3 or 4. Okay, folks, I'll divide you into 5 groups. That should be 4 people approximately per group. And I'll bring you back right at 12 noon. So if you want to be in a group, you can just form your own right here. That would be great. And if, yeah, great. You'll join them. Jenny, you want to join? Okay. Yeah, great. Did you want to be in a small group?